there are plenty of great places to start learning about MBTI and typology. I get a lot of questions about what books I recommend, what YouTube channels, things like that, where to start the journey or where to dive deeper than stuff you'll find on the internet. So I'm going to start a series of books related to MBTI and typology, and you can see the pile behind me. That is the never-ending queue of books, or books that I've read, books that I'm continuing to read, or books that I just always reference. And from that pile, I have pulled out where I would start, which is Gifts Differing by Isabel Myers. Now, I want to preface this by saying that I would not start with Carl Jung and Psychological Types, the 1921 book by Carl Jung, because it's very dense, it's esoteric. I would say my recommendation is to save it for the third or fourth book you read. You got to get a simple framework in place. It has to be established before you kind of go back and look how it all started. I really think that if someone were to start there, where it all really did start, that you would quickly be pushed away, or you would be, turn away from ever wanting to dive deeper into typology, because it's a tough read. Gifts Differing by Isabel Briggs Myers is essentially the Bible of MBTI. The book had been in the making for decades before it was finally released in the 80s. So it was basically like the 40s is when Isabel and her mother, Catherine, started writing this book, and they were kind of running in parallel to Jung, looking at his ideas, having their own thoughts on it. But what they did was they took his ideas that, like I said, were very esoteric at the time, and they said, we need to make this digestible, accessible to all people across all races, colors, creeds, intelligence levels, things like that. And then going beyond that, have them be able to collate this assessment into statistics, a way to figure out, can we see patterns evolving across society, relationships, speaking mannerisms, things like that, based on this assessment we're giving to people. So it went through many iterations. And what is surprising about the book is that it is actually very technical. There's lots of graphs, lots of standard deviation charts, lots of analysis on all kinds of things like type and academic pursuit, type and romance, type and IQ, type and career field, and studying a lot of college students over longitudinal studies. So I was actually fairly surprised by how much science and statistical data was involved in this book, which I think gives it a lot more credence than some of the anecdotal evidence that is in the book. So I think for those who need more of the science, one of the criticisms of MBTI is not scientifically backed, which is just total crap, as we all know, that there's a ton of it in the original. Isabel Myers does get into some of the more complicated parts of MBTI, like the cognitive functions, which is the true beauty of MBTI. It's the real nuts and bolts of it, the real in the weeds beauty of MBTI is developing your cognitive functions more than just understanding what your four-letter type is. This book also goes over how positive type development will look as each type grows during their lifetime. For those who've seen other videos by me, Jung is always about taking your type and developing it, and it's always going to be something that goes on throughout your whole life. People aren't even really halfway through type development by the time they're 50. They still have a lot to go. Isabel talks about what it's like to be, an ISFP as a kid, and then middle age, and then as a parent, and then in old age, and then how those things manifest throughout time. The writing style, the prose of Gifts Differing is remarkable, and I think it's only really rivaled by the great David Keirsey in his two-part series, Please Understand Me. Because think about it. When you're describing people, you can only use so many words before you're recycling the same words over and over. So it really gets into like poetic analogies with the types that is better than just a standard like this person is straightforward, logical. It's like that tells me a little bit, but like when they get into the archetypal and poetic prose that she uses, it really gets to the heart of each type. And after all, she was an INFP, so she's really looking at what's the core inner persona of this person. So I'll give this book an 85 out of 100. It cannot be missed when you're studying MBTI. It's got to be one of the top 5 books you use. I would say start here. If you're more intrigued, there are other books I'll go a little bit deeper, but it's like you got to read the Bible first before you can study any of the rest of it. So like I said, I would not recommend starting with psychological types, even though it is where she got most of her initial understanding of personality. I would wait a little bit. So if you are in need of more MBTI recommendations, here's my card. There you go. And let's talk soon. Thanks so much.